Queen Zarathes stood on the crystalline observation deck of her palace ship, watching the swirling nebula paint the void in shades of purple and gold. Her four arms moved in graceful patterns as she adjusted the holographic star charts floating before her. As ruler of the Kethmaran Empire, she commanded over 200 star systems and countless species, yet lately she felt an emptiness that even galactic conquest couldn't fill. "Your Majesty," came a soft voice behind her. She turned to see Marcus approaching, carrying a steaming cup of that strange earth beverage he called coffee. His movements were different from her people, more compact, efficient in a way that spoke of a world where resources were precious and every motion mattered. Zarathes accepted the cup with one of her lower hands, her translucent skin shifting to a warm amber as she smiled. Marcus was perhaps the most unusual addition to her court in the 3 centuries of her reign. When the human delegation had first arrived 5 years ago, seeking trade agreements for their small cluster of colony worlds, she had expected the typical groveling and desperate negotiations that came from lesser species. Instead, Marcus had stood before her throne with quiet confidence, speaking directly to her rather than through intermediaries. He didn't bow until she specifically requested it, and even then, it felt more like respect between equals than the subservience she was accustomed to. His people's technology was laughably primitive by Kethmaran standards, their ships barely capable of faster-than-light travel, yet something about him had intrigued her. "The morning reports, Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice carrying that peculiar human accent that still fascinated her court linguists. He handed her a data tablet, his fingers briefly brushing hers. The contact sent a familiar warmth through her nervous system. Something that had started as curiosity had evolved into something far deeper over the years. Their relationship had scandalized the court initially. A cosmic queen taking a bondmate from such a primitive species was unprecedented. Her advisors had whispered about political implications and genetic incompatibilities. But Marcus had proven himself time and again, offering insights that came from a perspective unlike any other species in her empire. "The Vrex Consortium is still pushing for exclusive mining rights in the Altair sector," she said, scrolling through the reports. "They claim their bio-neural technology gives them the exclusive ability to safely extract quantum crystals." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, sipping his own coffee. "What do you think about their claims?" Zarathes found herself smiling again. This was what she loved about him. He didn't simply agree with her or offer empty flattery. He asked questions that made her think, challenged her assumptions in ways that her terrified courtiers never would. "I think they're overconfident," she replied. "The Vrex have always believed their cybernetic enhancements make them superior to purely biological species. But there's something to be said for organic intuition." "Intuition can be surprisingly effective," Marcus agreed. "Sometimes the obvious solution isn't the right one." There was something in his tone that made Zarathes look at him more carefully. In the 5 years they'd been together, she'd learned to read the subtle expressions that crossed his remarkably mobile features. Right now, he looked like he was remembering something, or perhaps debating whether to say something. "You have that look again," she said, moving closer to him. "The one that suggests you know more than you're saying." Marcus chuckled, a sound that never failed to resonate pleasantly in her chest cavity. "I was just thinking about mining operations. Earth has a long history of them, though obviously nothing on the scale of quantum crystal extraction." She studied his face. Even after all this time, Marcus remained something of a mystery. "Oh." She knew the basic facts. He'd been born on New Terra, one of humanity's smaller colony worlds, had studied what they called resource management, and had been selected as part of their trade delegation due to his supposed expertise in interspecies relations. But there were gaps in his history that he deflected with gentle humor whenever she probed too deeply. Tell me about Earth mining, she said, settling onto one of the curved seating areas that lined the observation deck. I'm curious about pre-space mining techniques. Marcus joined her, his smaller frame fitting comfortably beside her larger one. Well, most of it was pretty straightforward compared to what you're used to. Dig holes, extract materials, try not to cause too much environmental damage. Though we did get creative sometimes when dealing with difficult terrain or dangerous conditions. Dangerous how? Oh, unstable geology, toxic gases, extreme temperatures. Humans have this tendency to want things that are buried in very inconvenient places. Marcus paused, staring out at the nebula. There were some operations that required specialized teams. People who could think their way through complex problems under pressure. The way he said it made Zarathes's sensory fronds twitch with curiosity. There was a weight to those words that suggested personal experience rather than academic knowledge. Before she could pursue the topic, her communication implant chimed with an urgent message. She frowned, accessing the data stream directly through her neural interface. "What is it?" Marcus asked, noting her expression. "Trouble in the Altair sector," she said, standing abruptly. "One of the quantum crystal mining operations has gone dark. No communications for the past 18 hours. Accident? Unknown. But it's the site that the Vrex Consortium was so eager to claim." Zarathes began moving toward the command center, her forearms gesticulating as she processed the implications. "If something has happened to our mining operation, it will give them exactly the excuse they need to claim the sector is too dangerous for lesser species." Marcus followed her, matching her longer stride with surprising ease. "What's the normal protocol for this kind of situation?" "Send a military investigation team. Standard procedure is to assume hostile action until proven otherwise." They entered the command center, where dozens of Kethmoran officers were already coordinating response efforts. "Admiral Thexvar will want to deploy a full battle group." "That seems like overkill for a mining operation," Marcus observed quietly. Zarathes paused, her tactical computers already running scenarios. "You think it's an accident?" "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that sometimes when you assume the worst-case scenario, you end up creating it. A full military response might escalate a simple industrial accident into an interstellar incident." She studied his face again. There was something in his expression, a kind of focused consideration that reminded her of the way her best tacticians looked when analyzing complex battle scenarios. It was an expression she'd seen on him before, usually when discussing seemingly mundane topics that somehow turned out to have deeper implications. "What would you suggest?" "A small reconnaissance team first. Gather information before committing to a course of action. If it is hostile action, you'll want to know what you're dealing with. If it's an accident, you'll avoid unnecessary complications." Admiral Thexvar approached, his cybernetic eye implants glowing with tactical data. "Your Majesty, I have 3 destroyer squadrons ready to deploy to Altair. We can have overwhelming force in the sector within 6 hours. Zarathes held up one hand. "What about a reconnaissance mission first, Admiral?" Thexvar's mandibles clicked in what she recognized as barely concealed disdain. His gaze flicked to Marcus before returning to her. "Your Majesty, with respect, our protocols exist for good reason. An unknown threat requires an immediate, decisive response. And if the threat is a gas leak or equipment failure, then we will have responded appropriately to a potential threat," Thexvar said stiffly. "The Vrex Consortium is watching this situation closely. Any sign of weakness will be exploited." Zarathes felt the familiar tension that came with difficult command decisions. Thexvar wasn't wrong. The Vrex had been probing for weaknesses in Kethmoran territory for months, looking for excuses to expand their own sphere of influence. A bungled response to this crisis could give them the opening they needed, but Marcus's suggestion also made sense. Sometimes the obvious answer wasn't the right one. "How long would a reconnaissance mission take?" she asked. 2 days minimum, Thexvar replied. 2 days during which any actual threat could escalate or escape. Marcus stepped forward slightly, and Zarathes noticed that several of the bridge officers shifted their attention to him. Over the years, many of them had learned to pay attention to the human's input, though they rarely admitted it openly. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, "what if the reconnaissance mission could be completed in hours instead of days?" Thexvar's cybernetic eye focused on Marcus with mechanical precision. "Impossible. The Altair sector is 12 light-years from here. Even our fastest scout ships require a full day each way." "What if we didn't use ships?" The command center fell quiet. Zarathes felt her skin shift to a puzzled blue-green as she tried to understand what Marcus was suggesting. "Explain," she said. Marcus moved to the central holographic display, his fingers dancing over the control interface with practiced ease. The three-dimensional map of the Altair sector materialized before them, showing the mining operation's last known position. "The mining station was built around a natural quantum resonance point, right?" Marcus asked, highlighting the relevant data streams. "That's why the crystals form in such high concentrations there." "Correct," Admiral Thexvar said slowly. "And quantum resonance points are connected through subspace in ways that normal matter can't access." Zarathes felt a chill run through her nervous system. "Marcus, you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting." He turned to meet her gaze, and for just a moment, she saw something in his eyes that she'd never seen before. A depth of knowledge and experience that seemed far too vast for someone from a primitive species that had barely mastered interstellar travel. "I'm suggesting," Marcus said quietly, "that maybe there are some problems that require unconventional solutions." The implications of his words hung in the air like static charge before a lightning strike. Quantum tunneling was theoretical for most species, deadly dangerous for the few who had attempted it, and completely impossible for any known biological entity. The energy requirements alone should have torn apart any living thing that tried to traverse subspace directly. "The human delegation's ships," Admiral Thexvar said slowly, "were equipped only with basic FTL drives. Your species doesn't have the technology for quantum manipulation." Marcus smiled. But it was a different kind of smile than Zarathes had seen from him before. Less gentle, more predatory. "Admiral," he said, "has it ever occurred to you that maybe you don't know everything about my species?" The temperature in the command center seemed to drop several degrees. Zarathes found herself staring at the human who had shared her private chambers for 5 years, wondering who exactly she had been living with. The Marcus she knew was gentle, thoughtful, sometimes playfully stubborn when discussing philosophy or art. This Marcus had steel in his voice and shadows in his eyes. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what aren't you telling me?" He looked around the command center, taking in the faces of her officers, the displays showing their military might, the symbols of power that had taken her centuries to build. She noticed how his gaze cataloged defensive positions, exit points, and the positioning of armed guards. It was the assessment of someone trained in tactics and threat evaluation. When his gaze returned to hers, she saw something that made her 4 hearts skip synchronized beats. Behind the warm brown eyes that had watched countless sunrises with her, there was a depth of knowledge and capability that seemed vast and carefully hidden. "Your Majesty," Marcus said formally, his voice carrying a new authority that made several officers unconsciously straighten, "if you truly want to understand what happened in the Altair sector, and if you want to resolve this crisis without bloodshed, I'm going to need you to trust me with something I've never shared with anyone outside of my own species." Admiral Thexvar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Your Majesty, surely you're not considering allowing an unvetted alien access to classified military operations? Marcus turned his attention to the Admiral, and Zarathes felt her skin ripple with surprise at the change in his demeanor. Admiral, with respect, I've been living in the Queen's palace for 5 years. If I had wanted to damage your empire, I've had countless opportunities. That's exactly what makes this suspicious, Thexvar countered. A long-term infiltration operation would require precisely this kind of patience. Zarathes watched the exchange with growing fascination. She'd seen Marcus debate with her courtiers before, but always with gentle humor and deference to their expertise. This was different. This Marcus spoke like someone accustomed to command situations and calculated risks. Admiral, Marcus said calmly, let me ask you something. In all your intelligence reports on humanity, what have you learned about our military capabilities? Thexvar's cybernetic eye whirred as he accessed files. Primitive projectile weapons, basic energy shields, conventional propulsion systems. Your species barely qualifies as a Type 1 civilization on the technological development scale. And how many military conflicts has humanity been involved in over the past 5 years? None that have come to our attention. Your colonies are too small and resource-poor to threaten anyone. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. And doesn't that seem strange to you? A species that develops interstellar travel, establishes multiple colony worlds, and then apparently abandons all military ambition? Zarathes felt her intellectual curiosity overriding her diplomatic caution. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe we're very good at hiding in plain sight, Marcus replied. Admiral, you assume that because you can't detect advanced human military technology, it doesn't exist. But what if the reason you can't detect it is because it operates on principles your sensors aren't designed to recognize? The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of quantum processing units. Zarathes found herself thinking back over their relationship, looking for clues she might have missed. Marcus's surprising knowledge of diverse topics. His ability to offer solutions to problems her experts couldn't solve. The way he sometimes seemed to know things about her empire that weren't in any reports she'd shared with him. Marcus, she said slowly, when you first came to my court, you said you were part of a trade delegation. I was. But that wasn't your primary function. He smiled, but it was the careful smile of someone deciding how much truth to reveal. Trade negotiations require understanding the political and military situation you're entering. It would be irresponsible to send diplomats into unknown territory without proper intelligence assessment. Admiral Thexvar's cybernetic implants began cycling through threat assessment protocols. You're admitting to espionage? I'm admitting to due diligence, Marcus corrected. And I'm admitting that the information my government wanted about the Keth-Moran Empire has been far exceeded by what I've learned about your character, Your Majesty. Zarathes felt something twist in her chest cavity. What kind of information? Military capabilities, political stability, treatment of subject species, potential for expansion into human territory. Marcus's expression softened as he looked at her. For what it's worth, my reports have consistently recommended you as a reliable ally and a leader worth respecting. The revelation should have made her angry. Any other species conducting covert intelligence operations in her territory would have faced immediate imprisonment or execution. But she found herself oddly unsurprised. On some level, she'd always known Marcus was more than he appeared. So what are you really, Marcus? She asked. What's your actual function in the human government? He was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him making a decision that would change the trajectory of both their lives. I hold a position that roughly translates to Strategic Operations Coordinator, he said finally. I specialize in situations that require unconventional solutions to complex problems. Unconventional how? The kind of problems that can't be solved with overwhelming force or standard diplomatic protocols. the kind that require understanding how different species think, what motivates them, and finding solutions that work for everyone involved. Zarathes processed this information. And the quantum tunneling? Marcus moved to a secondary control panel and began inputting commands that should have required high-level security clearance. Somehow, the system accepted his access codes. "Your Majesty," he said, "would you be willing to authorize a temporary suspension of standard monitoring protocols? What I'm about to show you is classified at levels that could affect interstellar security." Admiral Thexvar stepped forward aggressively. "Absolutely not. Your Majesty, this entire conversation has moved far beyond acceptable security parameters." But Zarathes was watching Marcus's hands move across the control interface with practiced efficiency. His movements suggested intimate familiarity with advanced technology that his species supposedly didn't possess. "Authorize it," she said quietly. "Your Majesty." "Authorize it, Admiral. That's an order." Thexvar's mandibles clicked with barely controlled frustration, but he complied. The command center's monitoring systems shifted to minimal surveillance mode. Marcus took a breath that seemed to center him for something significant. When he spoke again, his voice carried absolute certainty. "Your Majesty, how much do you know about quantum consciousness transfer?" Zarathes felt her skin shift to deep purple, the color of profound shock. Quantum consciousness transfer was theoretical even for the most advanced species in the galaxy. The energy requirements were astronomical, the risks were unknown, and most scientists believed it was fundamentally impossible. "It's theoretical," she managed to say. "For most species, yes." Marcus looked directly into her eyes. "But humans have some unique biological characteristics that make us adaptable to unconventional energy states." The implications hit her like a physical blow. If humans had mastered consciousness transfer, if they could move through quantum space in ways that bypassed all known detection methods, then everything her intelligence services believed about human capabilities was completely wrong. "The mining station," she said, understanding flooding through her consciousness. "I can be there and back within the hour," Marcus confirmed. "No ships, no detectable energy signatures, no evidence that would alert the Virex Consortium to any unusual Kethmaran capabilities." "And the risk?" Marcus' smile was gentle again, but now she could see the steel underneath it. "Your Majesty, I've been taking calculated risks my entire career. This one is well within my operational parameters." Zarathes found herself faced with a decision that would reshape her understanding of the galaxy's power balance. The human standing before her wasn't just her bondmate and advisor. He was a representative of a species that might be far more advanced and dangerous than anyone realized. "If I authorize this," she said slowly, "what happens to us?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications about trust, deception, and the future of their relationship. Marcus moved closer to her, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his expression. "What happens to us is what was always happening to us. We figure out problems together and try to make things better for everyone involved. Even if everything I thought I knew about you was wrong?" "Your Majesty," Marcus said softly, "everything you know about me that matters is still true. I still make terrible coffee. I still think your court philosophers ask unnecessarily complicated questions, and I'm still completely devoted to your happiness and the welfare of your people." Despite everything, Zarathes found herself smiling. "Show me what you can do." Marcus moved to the center of the command deck, and Zarathes noticed that her officers unconsciously stepped back, creating a circle of empty space around him. Something in his posture had changed. He stood differently now, with the balanced readiness of someone prepared for immediate action. "Computer, display quantum resonance patterns for the Altair sector," Marcus said, and Zarathes felt her breath catch as the system immediately responded to his voice command. Only senior staff had voice authorization for tactical displays. The holographic projection materialized between them, showing the complex energy weaves that made quantum crystal formation possible. Marcus studied the display for a moment, then began manipulating the data with hand gestures that suggested intimate familiarity with advanced physics. "Admiral," Marcus said without looking away from the display, "your records show the last communication from the mining station was 18 hours ago. What was the content of that transmission?" Thexvar's cybernetic eye whirred as he accessed the files. "Routine operational report. All systems nominal. Crystal extraction proceeding on schedule." "What about energy readings from the resonance point itself?" "Standard fluctuations. Nothing outside normal parameters." Marcus nodded, but his expression suggested he was seeing patterns that others missed. "May I access the raw sensor data?" "That information is classified," Thexvar began. "Admiral," Zarathes interrupted, "give him access." Marcus's fingers danced across the control interface, calling up data streams that filled the air around them with cascading numbers and energy patterns. As Zarathes watched, she began to understand that his earlier questions about mining operations hadn't been casual conversation. He was analyzing the situation with the expertise of someone who understood quantum mechanics at a level that exceeded her own scientific advisors. "There," Marcus said, highlighting a specific data sequence. 17 hours and 43 minutes ago. Do you see it?" Zarathes studied the readings, but they looked like normal background radiation to her. "I don't understand what I'm looking at." "The quantum resonance point experienced a micro-fluctuation lasting approximately 12 seconds. It's barely detectable unless you know what to look for." Admiral Thexvar moved closer to examine the data. "Those fluctuations occur naturally. They're caused by stellar interference patterns." "Not this one," Marcus said quietly. "This pattern suggests intentional manipulation. Someone used the resonance point as a focusing element for quantum tunneling." The command center fell silent except for the hum of processing units. Zarathes felt her skin shift to alarmed silver as the implications settled in. "You're suggesting someone tunneled directly to the mining station?" she asked. "I'm suggesting someone tunneled directly into the mining station. The question is whether it was an infiltration attempt or something else." Admiral Thexvar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Impossible. Quantum tunneling requires massive energy expenditures and specialized equipment. The power signature alone would be detectable across several star systems." Marcus smiled, and Zarathes noticed that several bridge officers exchanged concerned glances. "Admiral, you're thinking about tunneling the way the Kethmoran would do it. Massive energy projectors, stabilized corridors, brute force approaches. How else would it be done? What if instead of forcing a tunnel open, you convince space to let you through?" Zarathes found herself thinking like the physics student she'd been before ascending to the throne. "That would require manipulating the fundamental properties of quantum space itself." "Exactly. Instead of overwhelming the system, you work with it. Find the natural resonance patterns and amplify them precisely rather than forcing them open. That would still require technology beyond anything in the known galaxy," Admiral Thexvar protested. Marcus turned to face them both, and Zarathes saw something in his expression that made her nervous system fire warning signals. "Admiral, what would you say if I told you that technology doesn't always mean machines?" The question hung in the air like a charged particle about to discharge. Zarathes found herself staring at Marcus with growing understanding and alarm. "Marcus," she said slowly, "are you telling me that humans can manipulate quantum space biologically?" "I'm telling you," Marcus replied, "that evolution is more creative than most species assume. When humans first developed consciousness, We evolved in an environment with unusual quantum properties. Our neural architecture adapted to interface directly with quantum fields in ways that most species never needed to develop. The scientific implications hit Zarathus like a wave. If humans had evolved quantum consciousness as a natural ability, it would explain their apparent lack of advanced technology. They wouldn't need massive machines to accomplish what other species required enormous infrastructure to attempt. "You're claiming that humans are naturally quantum-enabled?" Admiral Thexavar's voice carried a mixture of skepticism and alarm. "I'm claiming that some humans are quantum-enabled," Marcus corrected. "It's not a universal trait. Maybe 1 in 10,000 have the neural architecture for it. Those who do typically find their way into specialized roles." "Specialized how?" Marcus looked directly at Zarathus. "Exploration, problem-solving, diplomatic missions to foreign territories where standard approaches might not work." The pieces fell into place with crystalline clarity. Marcus hadn't been sent as a trade negotiator. He'd been sent as something far more sophisticated, a quantum-enabled operative capable of gathering intelligence and operating in environments where normal technology would be detected or fail. "How long have you been able to tunnel?" she asked. "Since I was 16. It took several years of training to do it safely and reliably." Marcus moved closer to the holographic display. "Your Majesty, if someone used quantum tunneling to access your mining station, I can follow their path and determine what happened. But I need you to understand that what I'm about to show you will change how you think about human capabilities permanently." Zarathus glanced around the command center. Her officers were watching the exchange, with expressions ranging from fascination to alarm. Whatever happened next would ripple through the entire empire. "Do it," she said. Marcus nodded and began what looked like a meditation pose, standing with his feet shoulder-width apart and his hands relaxed at his sides. His breathing became deep and rhythmic. And Zarathus noticed that the ambient energy readings on the bridge began to fluctuate. "Computer, monitor all quantum field fluctuations in a 50-meter radius," she commanded. The sensors immediately began registering changes. Energy patterns that shouldn't exist started manifesting around Marcus, creating a visible distortion in the air that made him appear slightly translucent. "Fascinating," Admiral Thexvar muttered, his scientific curiosity overriding his security concerns. "His neural activity is somehow synchronizing with local quantum fields." Marcus's voice, when he spoke, seemed to come from both right in front of them and from somewhere impossibly distant. "Connecting to the Altair resonance point now." The holographic display exploded into activity as quantum streams began tracing paths through subspace. Zarathus watched in awe as Marcus's consciousness seemed to extend across 12 light-years of space instantaneously. "I can see the mining station," Marcus said, his voice carrying an odd echo. "The facility is intact, but the crew is unconscious. They appear to be in some kind of stasis field." "Stasis field," Zarathus leaned forward. "Natural or artificial?" "Artificial. Definitely artificial. The pattern is too precise to be accidental." Marcus was quiet for several moments, and the energy readings around him intensified. "There's something else here. Another consciousness in the quantum field." Admiral Thexvar's cybernetic eye began cycling through threat assessment protocols. "Hostile? Unknown. It's different. Not human, not Kethmoran, not any species I've encountered before." Marcus's breathing became more labored, suggesting that whatever he was doing required significant effort. "It's trying to communicate." "Can you understand it?" "Partially. It's using quantum harmonics instead of traditional language. The patterns suggest curiosity rather than hostility. It seems to be studying the mining operation." Zarathus felt her tactical instincts activate. "Studying it how?" "The way a scientist studies an interesting specimen. Non-destructively, but thoroughly." Marcus paused. and the energy fluctuations around him shifted to different frequencies. I think it's trying to understand how different species approach resource extraction. A researcher, Admiral Thexvar, said. That would explain the stasis field, preservation of subjects for extended observation. Your Majesty, Marcus said, his voice carrying new urgency. I need to make direct contact, but doing so will reveal human quantum capabilities to whatever species this represents. Zarathes found herself facing another decision with galactic implications. First contact with an unknown species was always dangerous, but if this entity was advanced enough to manipulate quantum fields and create stasis technology, it could represent either an enormous opportunity or a catastrophic threat. What's your assessment of the risk? She asked. Direct contact carries the possibility of hostile action, but the entity's behavior patterns suggest scientific curiosity rather than aggressive intent. The bigger risk is revealing human capabilities to a species that might share that information with others. Zarathes thought about the Vrex Consortium, about the delicate balance of power that maintained peace in their region of space, about the implications of the galaxy learning that humans were far more advanced than anyone suspected. Make contact, she decided, but be prepared to withdraw immediately if the situation becomes threatening. Marcus nodded, and the quantum fields around him intensified dramatically. The air itself seemed to thicken with energy, and several bridge officers stepped back as warning alarms began sounding. Contact established, Marcus announced, and his voice now carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies Zarathes could feel in her bones. The entity is surprised. It didn't expect to encounter quantum consciousness in what it considered a primitive species. What does it want? Knowledge exchange. It's offering to release the mining crew and share information about quantum field manipulation in exchange for data about human consciousness development. Admiral Thexvar moved to a secondary console and began running strategic analysis. Your Majesty, this could be exactly the kind of technological advancement we need to counter Vrex expansion. But Zarathes was watching Marcus, noting the strain that maintaining the connection was placing on his system. His human physiology wasn't designed for extended quantum field manipulation, and she could see that pushing much further would be dangerous. Marcus, what's the entity's technological level compared to known species? Significantly advanced. Their quantum manipulation capabilities exceed anything in current galactic databases by several orders of magnitude. But they seem to be primarily researchers rather than military expansionists. And they're interested in humans specifically? They're interested in any species that's developed quantum consciousness. Apparently, it's extremely rare in the galaxy. Most species that achieve interstellar travel do so through technological advancement rather than biological evolution. Zarathes felt a chill run through her system as the full implications became clear. If quantum consciousness was rare enough to attract the attention of advanced alien researchers, then humans represented something far more valuable and dangerous than anyone had realized. How many species have they studied? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a note of concern that made Zarathes's 4 hearts skip beats. Your Majesty, he said slowly, I think we need to continue this conversation in person. The entity is willing to meet directly, and what it wants to tell us about quantum consciousness development isn't something that should be discussed over open channels. It wants a face-to-face meeting? It wants a consciousness-to-consciousness meeting, in quantum space. Admiral Thexvar's mandibles began clicking rapidly. Your Majesty, this is moving far beyond established first contact protocols. But Zarathes was looking at Marcus, seeing the careful control he was maintaining over forces that could tear apart normal matter at the molecular level. Whatever the entity wanted to discuss, it was significant enough that he was willing to risk extended exposure to quantum fields. Can I go with you? she asked. Marcus's expression became very serious. Your Majesty, quantum space isn't safe for non-adapted consciousness. The energy levels involved could cause permanent damage to your neural architecture. Then you'll go alone? If you authorize it, yes. But you should know that whatever I learn from this entity will change how humans are perceived in the galaxy. There won't be any going back to being the harmless primitive species. Zarathes looked around her command center, at the officers who had served her faithfully for decades, at the displays showing the power of her empire, at the symbols of authority that had taken centuries to build. All of it suddenly seemed fragile compared to the forces Marcus was casually manipulating. Do it, she said. But Marcus? Yes, Your Majesty? Come back safely. Whatever else happens, I need you to come back. Marcus smiled, and for just a moment, he was the gentle human who made terrible coffee and asked thoughtful questions about philosophy. Always, Your Majesty. That's a promise. The quantum fields around him intensified to levels that made the air itself glow, and then Marcus simply stepped out of normal space, leaving only the fading echo of displaced energy and the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The command center fell into tense silence after Marcus disappeared. Zarathes found herself staring at the empty space where he had been standing, quantum field readings still fluctuating wildly on her sensors. Admiral Thexvar moved between monitoring stations, coordinating efforts to track the unprecedented energy signatures. Your Majesty, came the voice of Science Officer Keth Lynn from her position at the quantum analysis station. I'm reading massive resonance cascades throughout the Altair sector. Whatever is happening there is affecting subspace across multiple light years. Zarathes moved to examine the readings, her four hands dancing across control interfaces as she tried to understand the scope of what she was witnessing. The energy patterns were unlike anything in their databases, complex harmonics that seemed to be reshaping the fundamental structure of local space-time. Can you maintain contact with Marcus? She asked. His quantum signature is still detectable, but it's evolving, Kathleen reported. The patterns suggest he's interfacing directly with the anomalous entity at a consciousness level I didn't know was possible. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Zarathes found herself pacing the command deck, her natural calm eroded by worry for Marcus and concern about the implications of everything they'd discovered. The human she'd shared her life with for 5 years had revealed himself to be something far more complex and potentially dangerous than she'd ever imagined. But more than that, he'd revealed that humanity itself might be one of the most significant powers in the galaxy, hidden behind a facade of primitive technology and peaceful intentions. Your Majesty, Admiral Thexvar approached with a data tablet. I've been reviewing our intelligence files on human colonies. If Marcus's claims about quantum consciousness are accurate, we may have seriously underestimated their strategic capabilities. How so? Human colonies are established in locations that seemed random or economically marginal to our analysts. But if you map them according to quantum resonance points, Thexvar activated a holographic star chart. They form a perfect network for instantaneous quantum communication and travel. Zarathes studied the map, feeling her skin shift to concerned purple. They've been building a quantum infrastructure network while everyone assumed they were struggling with basic interstellar expansion. It gets worse, Thexvar continued. Cross-referencing with diplomatic records, human representatives have been present at every major interstellar treaty negotiation in the past 50 years. Always as minor participants, always representing primitive colonies that posed no threat. Intelligence gathering on a galactic scale, Zarathes realized. They've been watching and learning about every major species while remaining completely overlooked. Before Thexvar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Quantum field readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for biological entities to survive. Marcus, Zarathes whispered, moving to the monitoring station. He's returning, Kathleen announced, her voice tight with concentration. But the energy signatures are different, more complex. The air in the center of the command deck began to shimmer, and slowly Marcus materialized back into normal space. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a being unlike anything in Zarathes's experience. It seemed to be composed of living light, its form shifting between states of matter in ways that suggested complete mastery over physical laws. When it moved, reality bent around it like space-time responding to a massive gravitational field. Marcus looked exhausted but alert, his eyes carrying new depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal understanding. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with frequencies that resonated through dimensions beyond the normal three. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "may I present the architect? It represents a collective consciousness that has been studying quantum development in biological species for approximately 12 million years. The being of light pulsed with patterns that Zarathes somehow understood were meant as greeting. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind, rather than reaching her through normal auditory channels. "Greetings, Cosmic Queen. Your bondmate has shown us remarkable capabilities." Zarathes felt her diplomatic training take over, even though nothing in her education had prepared her for this moment. "Welcome to my ship, Architect. We are honored by your presence." "The honor is ours. In 12 million years of observation, we have encountered only 17 species with natural quantum consciousness. Humans represent the 18th, and by far the most sophisticated." Admiral Thexvar stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his security concerns. "Most sophisticated how?" The architect's form shifted to what might have been amusement. "Other quantum-conscious species developed the ability to manipulate individual particles or simple fields. Humans have evolved to interface with the fundamental structure of reality itself." Marcus moved to stand beside Zarathes, and she noticed that quantum fields still flickered around him like a barely controlled aura. "Your Majesty, the architect has been studying the mining station to understand how different species approach resource extraction, but what they discovered about human consciousness development has implications far beyond mining operations." "Explain," Zarathes said, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Your species believes humans are primitive because their technology appears limited," the architect communicated directly. "But they do not need advanced technology. They have become the technology." The statement hung in the air like a paradigm-shifting revelation. Zarathes felt her understanding of galactic power dynamics crumbling and reforming around new realities. "What do you mean?" she asked. Marcus answered, his voice carrying new authority. "Other species build machines to manipulate quantum fields. Humans evolved to become living quantum manipulation systems. We don't need massive energy projectors because our consciousness can directly interface with subspace. We don't need artificial intelligence because our brains naturally process multiple quantum states simultaneously." The evolution occurred on their homeworld during a period of unique quantum instability, the architect added. Most biological systems would have been destroyed. Instead, human consciousness adapted to use quantum uncertainty as a natural environment. Admiral Thexavar's cybernetic eye was cycling through analysis protocols at maximum speed. "Are you saying that humans are naturally more advanced than any known technological civilization?" "We are saying that humans represent a completely different evolutionary pathway. While other species developed tools to overcome environmental challenges, humans became tools." Zarathes found herself looking at Marcus with entirely new understanding. "That's why human colonies seemed economically marginal. You weren't looking for resources, you were mapping quantum resonance points." "Not just mapping them," Marcus confirmed. attuning to them. Every human colony is positioned to take advantage of natural quantum highways that other species can't even detect. And the trade delegations? Marcus smiled, but there was no deception in it now. Genuine trade negotiations, but also assessment missions. We needed to understand how other species would react if they knew what humans were capable of. The question now, the architect interjected, is what humans intend to do with capabilities that exceed those of any other known biological species. The implications crashed over Zarathes like a quantum storm. If humans could manipulate reality at a fundamental level, if they could travel instantaneously across galactic distances, if they could interface directly with the building blocks of existence itself, then they weren't just another interstellar civilization. They were potentially the most powerful force in the galaxy. Marcus, she said slowly, how many humans have these abilities? Approximately 40 million across all colonies, he replied. About 1% of our total population. 40 million beings capable of quantum manipulation, Admiral Thexvar said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's a strategic force that could reshape galactic civilization. Indeed, the architect agreed. Which is why we wanted to meet with human consciousness directly. In our 12 million years of observation, we have seen quantum-conscious species follow two primary paths. Which are? Zarathes asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. Peaceful development and integration with other species, or conquest and subjugation of less advanced civilizations. The choice hung in the air like a crossroads that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Zarathes found herself understanding that this moment would define not just human-Kethmaran relations, but the destiny of every species in known space. Marcus moved closer to her, and she could feel the quantum energies that surrounded him like a barely contained storm. Your Majesty, the architect has offered to share 12 million years of accumulated knowledge about quantum consciousness development. But accepting would mean acknowledging that humans are no longer hiding our capabilities. And refusing? We continue as we have been, letting other species assume we're primitive while quietly building our understanding of galactic politics and power structures. Zarathes looked around her command center, seeing her officers' expressions ranging from awe to terror as they processed the magnitude of what they'd learned. The safe, predictable universe they'd known had just been revealed as far stranger and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. There is another consideration, the architect added. The Vrex Consortium has been developing artificial quantum manipulation systems. Their technology is crude compared to human natural abilities, but they are approaching the threshold where they could pose a threat to quantum-conscious species. A threat how? Admiral Thexvar asked. Artificial quantum manipulation creates instabilities in subspace. If the Virex continue their development without understanding quantum consciousness, they could destabilize entire star systems. Marcus nodded grimly. The architect showed me their research data. The Virex are trying to brute force quantum tunneling using cybernetic neural interfaces. They don't understand that quantum consciousness requires biological evolution, not technological augmentation. What happens if they continue? Zarathes asked. Catastrophic quantum cascade failures, potentially affecting dozens of star systems before the instabilities could be contained. The full scope of the crisis became clear to Zarathes. This wasn't just about human capabilities or first contact with an ancient species. This was about preventing a disaster that could destroy entire regions of space. What do you recommend? She asked Marcus. Limited revelation, he said without hesitation. We reveal enough about human quantum capabilities to justify intervening in Vrex research, but not so much that other species begin to see humans as an existential threat. A wise approach, the architect agreed. We would be willing to serve as neutral mediators in such discussions. Zarathes found herself making yet another decision that would reshape galactic politics. Do it. Arrange a meeting with Vrex leadership and any other species developing quantum manipulation technology. Your Majesty, Admiral Thexavar said carefully, this will fundamentally change humanity's position in galactic affairs. It will, she agreed, but it will also potentially save countless lives and prevent a disaster that could affect everyone. Marcus smiled, and she saw both the gentle human she'd fallen in love with and the quantum-capable being who could reshape reality with his consciousness. Thank you for trusting me. There is one more matter, the architect communicated, its form shifting to colors that suggested significance. In our observations, quantum consciousness development is strongest when individuals form deep emotional bonds with other consciousness types. Your relationship has enhanced your bondmate's capabilities considerably. Zarathes felt her skin shift to embarrassed yellow-green. Our relationship affects his abilities. Emotional resonance creates quantum field harmonics, Marcus explained, moving to take her hands with two of his. My connection to you has made me more effective than I've ever been. Indeed. The depth of feeling between different species creates quantum effects that amplify consciousness capabilities. Your bond represents something that occurs perhaps once in a million years. Admiral Thexvar cleared his throat. Your Majesty, does this mean that human-alien relationships could potentially create beings with enhanced quantum capabilities? It means that the future of quantum consciousness development may depend on cooperation rather than isolation, the architect replied, something humans seem to understand intuitively. Zarathes looked at Marcus, seeing him now not just as her bondmate, but as a representative of a species that might hold the key to the next stage of galactic evolution. The revelation should have been overwhelming, but instead she felt oddly peaceful. So what happens now? She asked. Marcus squeezed her hands gently. Now we figure out how to make all of this work for everyone involved, just like we always do. The mining station crew has been restored to normal consciousness, the architect added. They will remember nothing unusual except a brief equipment malfunction. However, we have left them with subconscious knowledge that will help them develop more efficient extraction techniques. And the Vrex situation? We will arrange for them to discover certain information that will redirect their research toward safer approaches. With proper guidance, their technology could complement rather than threaten natural quantum consciousness. As the architect began to fade back into quantum space, Zarathes realized that her empire, her life, and her understanding of reality had all been fundamentally transformed in the course of a single day. Remember, the architect's final communication resonated through her mind. Evolution favors cooperation over conquest. The species that learn to work together will inherit the universe. And then they were gone, leaving only the gentle hum of quantum fields slowly returning to normal and the knowledge that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Marcus turned to face her fully, quantum energy still flickering around him like controlled lightning. Your Majesty, are you ready for the interesting part of our relationship to begin? Zarathes laughed, feeling lighter than she had in decades, despite the enormity of everything she'd learned. Marcus, I'm beginning to think the interesting part started 5 years ago. I just didn't know it yet. Fair point, he agreed, and the command center filled with the sound of officers trying not to laugh at their cosmic queen making jokes in the aftermath of first contact with beings who could reshape reality. Some things, Zarathes realized, remained wonderfully, reassuringly human,